On a cold November morning in 1944, in a prison courtyard in Budapest, a young woman stands facing a firing squad. She is 23 years old. Behind her, inside the prison walls, guards and officials watch through narrow windows. In front of her, a row of rifles waits for the command. Somewhere in that same city, her mother is still alive, unaware of the exact hour, but very aware of what is coming. The young woman has been offered a deal. Cooperate, confess, ask for mercy, give the names of the people who sent you, admit that you were wrong to come back. She refused. Her name is Hannah Senesh. To understand why a Hungarian court in 1944 executed a 23-year-old woman whose most dangerous weapons on paper were a British radio set and a notebook full of poems, you have to go back to a different Budapest before the war, and then forward into a world of special operations, coded transmissions, and a kind of courage that would echo long after the guns fell silent. Hannah is born in 1921 in Budapest into a cultured, middle-class Jewish family. Her father, Béla Senesh, is a well-known playwright and journalist. Her mother, Kati, runs the household and cares for Hannah and her brother. The apartment is full of books, newspapers, and talk of theater and politics. For most of her childhood, Budapest is one of those European capitals Americans like to imagine from old movies. Cafes with wicker chairs on the sidewalk, trams rattling along river embankments, people reading newspapers in parks. For a talented, sensitive girl who loves words, it is a good place to grow. Then her father dies. Hannah is 6. The loss leaves a hole, but it also leaves a legacy. She grows up with a deep connection to literature and a sense that writing can matter. As she enters her teens, something else enters her life. Anti-Semitism is not new in Hungary, but in the 1930s, it gets teeth. The Hungarian government, seeking to align itself more closely with Nazi Germany, begins passing anti-Jewish laws. First, they restrict how many Jews can attend universities. Then, they limit professions. Jewish businessmen lose contracts. Jewish lawyers and doctors see their licenses questioned. At school, Hannah feels it directly. She is bright. She wants to pursue higher education. She wants to succeed on merit. But the system tells her in subtle and not so subtle ways there is a ceiling above your head, and it is dropping. She watches as former classmates who are not Jewish glide more easily into opportunities. She hears jokes and slurs in hallways. She sees newspaper headlines that talk about the Jewish problem. For a while, the family tries what many middle-class Jews in Central Europe try. Blend in, speak perfect Hungarian, dress like everyone else, don't attract attention, hope that this storm will pass. It doesn't. Instead, Hannah discovers a different way to respond. She starts attending meetings of a Zionist youth group. There, she hears a different message. You are not a tolerated guest in someone else's country. You are part of a people with its own future. That future is in the land of Israel. At these meetings, she learns about kibbutzim in Palestine, communal farms where young Jews drain swamps, plant orchards, and try to build a new society. She hears about Haifa and Tel Aviv. She reads Hebrew words, stumbling over them, falls in love with the idea of a life far from European hatred. She makes a decision. At 18, while many of her Budapest peers dream of university or careers in law or journalism, Hannah chooses to leave. In 1939, as Europe slides toward war, she boards a ship and sails to the British Mandate of Palestine. The journey is more than a change of address. It is a deliberate break. She leaves behind not only the city where she grew up, but also her mother, her friends, and the language of her childhood. She trades the Danube for the Mediterranean, trams for donkey carts, the skyline of Budapest for the rough outline of Carmel and the Judean hills. In the north of Palestine, she joins kibbutz Sdot Yam, near Caesarea. The kibbutz is everything Budapest is not. There are no fancy cafes, there are no theaters with velvet seats. There is mud, fields, shared dormitories, and long days of physical labor. Hannah throws herself into it. She learns to milk cows, pick crops, and cook in communal kitchens. She learns Hebrew, stumbling at first, then gaining fluency, adding another language to the Hungarian, German, and some English she already speaks. She keeps writing. Now her poems are about the sea she sees every day, the sky over the Carmel, the sand of the coastal plain. One of them will become famous, Eli, Eli, my God, a short, simple prayer that the beauty of the world will never cease, the sand in the sea, the rush of the waters, the thunder in the sky, the prayer of man. While she's adjusting to this new life, the old world she left behind is coming apart. War breaks out. Poland is invaded. France falls. Britain stands alone against Nazi Germany. The Soviet Union, under Stalin, is first Hitler's partner in carving up Eastern Europe, then, after 1941, his enemy. In the United States, people watch newsreels and read headlines about battles that sound far away. In Palestine, the war feels both distant and very close. Britain still controls the territory. British soldiers march through Haifa and Jerusalem. British ships patrol the coast. British airfields dot the landscape. At the same time, reports filter in from Europe. Jews are being rounded up, deported, killed. For a while, the full scale of the Holocaust is not recognized. There are rumors, fragments, letters. People talk about ghettos, forced labor, shootings in woods. The picture is incomplete, but it is clear enough for someone like Hannah. Jewish communities in places like Hungary are in mortal danger. She thinks about her mother. Kati is still in Budapest, living under laws that get tighter each year. The contrast becomes unbearable. Hannah is in a place where, despite British restrictions, she can walk freely as a Jew, carry a rifle in a Haganah drill, plant trees in soil she calls her own. Her mother lives under a regime that is copying Nazi policies and now openly tied to Hitler's war machine. She feels pulled in two directions: gratitude for her new safety, guilt for having left others behind. By 1942, Hannah has joined the Haganah, the main Jewish self-defense organization in the Yishuv. She does guard duty in the fields at night. She trains with weapons. She reads political tracts about the need for Jews to take responsibility for their own defense. Then, in 1943, something happens that connects her small kibbutz world to the very center of the global conflict. The British, desperate for more intelligence and resistance inside Nazi-occupied Europe, begin recruiting people from the Jewish community in Palestine for special missions. They have a problem. Most British agents stick out in Central Europe. They speak with accents. They don't know the terrain. They have to learn everything from scratch. The Yishuv has something the British lack. It has young men and women who were born in places like Hungary, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, speak local languages like natives, know customs, jokes, songs, and street slang, now are fluent in Hebrew, disciplined enough to handle military training, and motivated by a personal stake in what happens to Jews back home. The British MI9 and the Special Operations Executive, the SOE, decide to use that resource. They create a program to train Jewish volunteers from Palestine as paratroopers and clandestine agents to insert into occupied Europe. Their tasks will be dangerous and varied: help downed Allied pilots escape, make contact with local resistance movements, gather intelligence, and when possible, assist Jewish communities under threat. 250 volunteers step forward. They are men and women. Many are barely in their 20s. All know that the missions they are volunteering for are very likely one-way trips. Hannah is among them. Imagine what that decision means. She has survived the first years of World War II in relative safety. She has a community. She has fields to work with, friends to laugh with, nights by the Mediterranean. She is a beloved figure in her kibbutz, known for her serious face, quick smile, and the poems she scribbles on scraps of paper. She chooses to walk into the line of fire. In training camps under British supervision, she learns to do things that would have been unthinkable for many women of her parents' generation. She jumps out of airplanes. She rolls and hits the ground, practicing over and over until her legs and shoulders know how to land without breaking. She learns Morse code. Long and short beeps become letters in her mind. She practices sending and receiving messages under time pressure, imagining that somewhere out there an Allied command center will one day decode her signals. She learns how to use a radio set the size of a suitcase with wires, coils, and vacuum tubes, state-of-the-art communication gear for the 1940s. She learns basic explosives, map reading, and the art of blending into a crowd. She passes. By early 1944, she is part of a small group assigned to a mission aimed at Hungary. The timing is razor thin. Until March 1944, Hungary is an ally of Germany, but still has its own government. Anti-Jewish laws are in place, but there have not yet been mass deportations to Auschwitz. British and Jewish planners hope that if they can get agents into the country in time, they might help organize resistance, get word out, and perhaps even influence the Hungarian leadership to refuse German demands to hand over their Jewish citizens. Then, on March 19, 1944, German troops roll across the Hungarian border. Hitler is done trusting Regent Horthy. The Wehrmacht occupies Budapest. An SS officer named Adolf Eichmann arrives to organize deportations. The window closes almost as soon as it opens. Hannah and her comrades are not in Hungary yet. They are on a plane. In March 1944, a British transport aircraft crosses the night sky over occupied Yugoslavia. On board, alongside crates and equipment, are Jewish volunteers from Palestine. One by one, they jump. Hannah's parachute opens. She falls through cold air toward fields and forests that are not far by geography from the city where she was born, but that are now part of a patchwork of partisan zones, German patrols, and shifting front lines. She lands in Yugoslav territory controlled by partisans loyal to Josip Broz Tito. For the next 3 months, she lives and operates with guerrilla fighters in the rugged hills and valleys of Croatia and Bosnia. She carries a British-made Sten gun, a cheap, reliable submachine gun used by Allied special forces. She helps operate radio sets powered by hand-cranked generators, sending encrypted messages back to Allied bases in the Middle East. At night, in camp, under the trees or in ruined farmhouses, she still writes. One of her last and most famous poems is only 4 lines long. Blessed is the match consumed in lighting the flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the secret fastness of the heart. Blessed is the heart with strength to stop its beating for honor's sake. Blessed is the match consumed in lighting the flame. It is a statement of intent. She knows exactly what she is risking. She does not expect to come back to kibbutz kitchens and harvests. Her mission, however, is stuck in a cruel paradox. The British, cautious and bureaucratic, worry about sending agents into a country that has just been fully occupied by the Germans. The Zionist leadership in Palestine, worried about losing some of its best young people in essentially suicide missions, hesitates. Time passes. Inside Hungary, trains begin leaving for Auschwitz almost every day. By the summer of 1944, in a span of just weeks, hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews are deported. Many are gassed on arrival. Others are worked to death. From her base with the partisans, Hannah hears only fragments, but she knows enough. Wait too long, and there will be no one left to save. In June 1944, she makes a decision. She will not wait. Together with 2 male comrades, she moves toward the Hungarian border. They plan to cross near a small village using forged papers and their knowledge of the language. As they approach the border, things go wrong. The exact sequence of events is still debated, but the broad outline is clear. The group runs into Hungarian border police, the gendarmes. They are stopped. 1 or more of her companions manage to slip away. Hannah, carrying a British military radio transmitter, does not. The gendarmes search her belongings. They find the radio. In that moment, any hope of passing as an innocent traveler vanishes. To the Hungarian authorities, she is now a spy. They haul her to a local station, then to a larger prison. Interrogations begin. Hungary is now effectively under German occupation. The Hungarian secret police and military work closely with the Gestapo. They have seen enough partisans and agents to know what to look for. They want names. They want to know who trained her, where she came from, and who was waiting for her in Budapest. They want codes, radio protocols, routes. The methods they use are brutal. Hannah is stripped, tied to a chair, beaten. Blows fall on her face, her body. At one point, interrogators knock out teeth. They keep her without sleep. They shout, threaten, and demand. She does not talk. They escalate. They bring in her mother. For Hannah Senesh, the last few years have been a nightmare. She has endured anti-Jewish laws, the wearing of yellow stars, the increasing restrictions on movement, and now the sight of neighbors disappearing into trains. She knows her daughter went to Palestine. She has probably guessed or heard that Hannah might be involved in something dangerous. Now she is told that her daughter has been caught as a British agent. The police bring Kati to the prison, stand her where Hannah can see her through a doorway, and tell Hannah, "Talk, or we will kill your mother." It is the kind of weapon that would break almost anyone. Hannah looks at her mother, then at her interrogators. She says nothing. She refuses to hand them the names of other agents. She refuses to give them codes that could allow them to intercept and fake British radio traffic. She refuses to let them use her as a tool to hunt down others who, like her, have left safe places to walk into the heart of darkness. For months, this pattern continues. Beatings, threats, offers, silence. In a small cell, she scratches lines of poetry into the wall. 1, 2, 3, 8 feet long. 2 strides across, the rest is dark. 1, 2, 3. Maybe another week, or the next month may still find me here. But death, I feel, is very near. She knows where this road ends. In October 1944, the political situation in Hungary deteriorates further. Regent Horthy, who had tried belatedly to distance Hungary from Germany, is forced to resign. The fascist Aerocross party takes power. They are even more fanatically pro-Nazi and even more brutal toward Jews and anyone they consider traitors. Hannah's case moves quickly now. On October 28, 1944, she is brought before a military tribunal in Budapest. She is charged with treason and espionage. The prosecution argues that she is a Hungarian citizen who has taken up arms with the country's enemies and returned as a spy. They point to the radio transmitter, the training, the parachute drop, her ties to the British and to the Zionist movement. She does not deny that she came as part of an Allied mission. She does not beg for mercy. She argues, in effect, that she is fighting a regime that is murdering her people. The judges are not interested in moral arguments. They adjourn, they reconvene, they change one of the officers on the panel. On November 7, 1944, they announce their verdict. Guilty. Sentence. Death. She is given a brief chance to write to her family. She reportedly composes a short note to her mother. Then she is led into the prison courtyard. A priest or rabbi is offered. She declines. She stands straight. When guards move to tie a blindfold, she refuses. She wants, she says, to look her executioners in the eye. The order is given. Shots crack the air. She falls. Somewhere in the city, artillery from the approaching Red Army can already be faintly heard. Within months, Budapest will be engulfed in a brutal siege. Soviet troops will enter, fighting German defenders street by street. The Aerocross regime will collapse. The Soviets will bring their own system, their own secret police, their own prisons. The Hungarian state that executed Hannah, aligned with Nazi Germany, will be replaced by a Hungarian state aligned with the Soviet Union. In the new order, different portraits will hang on office walls, different slogans will be printed in newspapers, but many of the judges, functionaries, and policemen who once served one ideology will find ways to serve another. For them, Hannah's story is inconvenient. She is a Jew, a Zionist, an agent of the British Empire, and, in a larger sense, of the world that will eventually be led by an American-centered Western alliance. Her memory survives, instead, in two places. One is in the hearts and stories of the Jewish community in Palestine and later in Israel. The other is in the files and archives of the very Allied world she died trying to help. In 1950, after the war and after the Iron Curtain has fallen across Europe, her remains are exhumed from Budapest and reburied in Jerusalem, on Mount Herzl, the national cemetery of the new state of Israel. In the years that follow, children in Israel learn her poems in school. They memorize Eli, Eli, and Blessed is the Match. Soldiers, on Memorial Days, recite the lines she carved into cell walls. A museum is established in her old kibbutz house at Sdot Yam, filled with photographs, letters, and the battered equipment of a young woman who once jumped from a British plane into the dark. In the broader Western world, her story takes longer to spread. Through the 1950s and 1960s, the focus is on rebuilding, on the Cold War standoff between superpowers, on nuclear weapons, on Berlin, Korea, Cuba. Yet, beneath that layer of geopolitics, the same technological advances that define the Cold War also shape how people like Hannah are remembered. Radio, which she used as a weapon, is now a common household appliance everywhere. Television, invented before the war, becomes the dominant medium of the age. Cheap printing, the rise of paperback books, later videotapes, and eventually digital media make it possible for stories that once lived only in veterans' meetings and memorial services to reach millions. In the Soviet sphere, and in satellite states like Communist Hungary, narratives about World War II are carefully controlled. The official story emphasizes heroic communist partisans, Soviet sacrifices, and the Red Army's victory over fascism. Jewish suffering is acknowledged selectively, and Zionist resistance that later leads to a state aligned with the West sits uneasily with that narrative. In the West, and particularly in Israel and the United States, a different ecosystem evolves. Holocaust survivors publish memoirs with American and British presses. Historians at universities in New York, London, and Jerusalem study scattered documents about missions like the Jewish parachutist from Palestine. Documentaries are produced, songs based on Hannah's poems are recorded and played on radio stations. What was once a secret SOE operation, with briefing papers locked in British cabinets, becomes part of public history. For Americans watching from afar, her story resonates in unexpected ways. She trained with British instructors who operated under the same broad intelligence umbrella that would later give rise to organizations like the CIA and NATO's integrated command structures. She used a radio to connect an isolated partisan group in the Balkans to command centers in Cairo or Jerusalem, an early example of long-range, encrypted communication that would become standard in Cold War operations. She embodies a pattern that becomes very familiar in later decades. Small, highly trained teams dropped behind enemy lines, equipped not with heavy artillery, but with specialized knowledge, technology, and the ability to blend in. When Americans found themselves in Korea, Vietnam, or other Cold War theaters, their special forces would follow similar patterns, using ever more advanced radios, then satellites, then secure digital systems. The technology grew more sophisticated. The stakes remained life and death. Hannah's mission, on the scale of world events, failed. She did not manage to rally Hungarian Jews to resistance. She did not redirect the course of Hungarian politics. She did not save her mother. Trains continued to leave Hungary for Auschwitz throughout the summer of 1944. But in another sense, she became a symbol of something that mattered deeply in the long contest between open societies and closed regimes. She showed that even when the odds are impossibly against you, it is still possible to choose to leave safety for danger. To choose, once captured, not to turn others in. To choose to die without lying for your captors. By the time the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the world had changed again. Computers, satellites, and fiber optic cables connected continents. Stories that once would have been local now traveled at the speed of light. Archives opened in Budapest and Moscow, revealing more details about wartime trials and operations. Historians in newly democratic Hungary revisited cases like Hannah's. Israeli institutions digitized her writings. The New York Times and other Western outlets revisited overlooked figures from the war, giving them obituaries decades late. Hannah's face, young, intense, with short dark hair and serious eyes, appeared on websites, in documentaries, and in classrooms around the world. For viewers in the United States, there is a particular fascination in her story. It connects many threads: the Holocaust, the birth of Israel, the clandestine wars of the OSS and SOE, the moral clarity of fighting Nazism, and the later ideological contests of the Cold War. It also underscores a difference that would define the Cold War era. In the systems that executed her and then suppressed or distorted her memory, the state tried to monopolize truth. In the systems she died trying to help, and in those that would later ally with her people, the state did not control every printing press, antenna, or camera. It is not that democracies always tell the truth or immediately honor every hero, far from it, but they are more vulnerable to stories. A poem carved in a prison cell can end up, decades later, in a high school textbook in Iowa. A mission briefed in a small tent in the Middle East can become a documentary watched on a flat-screen TV in Texas. A 23-year-old woman shot in a courtyard in Budapest can become, in hindsight, part of the same long struggle that saw Americans and their allies first confront Nazi totalitarianism, then Soviet domination, with tools that combined power and principle, weaponry and words. Hannah Senesh did not live to see the Cold War. She did not see the Hungarian People's Republic fall, or Soviet statues pulled down, or satellite dishes bloom on rooftops that once carried only party slogans. But the kind of mission she volunteered for, the idea that you can use advanced training, high-end communication technology for your era, and intimate knowledge of a country's language and culture to push back against tyranny, would become a central motif in the decades after her death. And the choice she made in the interrogation room, what to say, what not to say, what kind of person to be when the state has you tied to a chair, remains, even in an age of drones and cyber operations, the core question behind all the hardware. In the end, her story is not about the particular brand of rifle the firing squad used, or the precise model of radio she carried out of that British plane. It is about the one thing no regime, Nazi or Soviet, could ever fully control: the decision of a human being alone in a cell to hold on to the truth.